As you guys, this is a portable frac sand plant, and basically has the ability to handle, the combination of these two trailers has the ability to handle about 150 tons an hour, making an 8x70 mesh frac sand, or it can do about 180 tons an hour, making an 8x50 mesh frac sand. And this piece of equipment that's moving up in the air right now is the heart and soul of the whole plant. That's a flat bottom classifier, or it deals the lights out. The lights out is for when you're doing lignite removal or something where you're doing specific gravity separation. Or in this case, we're doing everything is the same specific gravity that goes in there, so we're making size separation.
That's why it won't sit here because
Nope. We're just weld it together and let it rip. Yeah. And transports in that other orientation, and we're putting it up vertical, and that's where it's going to be, where it's going to run when it's in the plant. And you got to hook some things up, sure.
yeah. That way, if your customer doesn't have we think a turn like that would be cool. He doesn't have it. He's got a big enough feet. Slide underneath that.
Basically what goes on, there's also another sump that goes on to this arrangement. It's not here right now, but the feed comes from the mine, comes from the run of mine, and they'll have to go over a screen with it. They're going to go over the screen and get rid of big stuff coming up. They're going to get rid of misplaced material that's on the mine material. And then they're going to feed that material into a sump. So it's coming out of the mine, up a conveyor, drops into a sluice box. In that sluice box, they're adding water, and then it's going into a sump. And from that sump, it pumps up to that hydrocyclone up on the top. Now that hydrocyclone is basically doing two things. One, it's getting rid of clays that you don't want in frac sand. And two, it's preparing the feed to the flat bottom classifier at a density that you want it to be, which is about 65% solids. Here's how the flat bottom classifier works. Flat bottom classifier has the solids raining down. In other words, the sand is coming downward in this thing, in this cylinder, and we're adding water into this plenum, at the silver colored plenum at the bottom. Adding water in there. And if you were looking at that when it was laying down, there's a bunch of little red holes in there, and that water that goes into that plenum shoots up all those little holes in there, and it creates a uniform column of water coming up this vessel at a very specific speed, and that water coming up at that speed carries particles of a certain size and finer up over the top, and there's a weir on top, so that water and particles of a certain size and finer flow over the top, and they come out this outlet here, and your money, the frac sand, the 8 mesh by 70 mesh, that comes out of these little ports down the bottom. There's 3 ports in this vessel here. And the way it determines that is there is a sensor in here which is measuring the slurry specific gravity in this column. And when that slurry specific gravity gets to a certain point, it actuates valves. And those valves open up, and that sand drops out. The money drops out, the frac sand drops out into that sump. So that's your money, that's your frac sand, that's your 8 mesh by 70 mesh or 8 mesh by 50 mesh. So that material then gets pumped from this pump right here. It's going to get pumped over to this trailer over here. This trailer over here has a dewatering screen on it. The dewatering screen, as you can see, is split down the middle. So the dewatering screen is doing 2 different things. It's dewatering the frac sand, and that's dewatering some other material which we're going to talk about in a minute. But the frac sand material gets pumped to a hydrocyclone up there. It's a large diameter hydrocyclone. I believe it's a 24-inch hydrocyclone, 20 or 24-inch hydrocyclone, and that dewaters that 8 mesh by 70 mesh material to about 65–70% solids, and then that underflow from that cyclone drops onto 1/2 of this dewatering screen, and the dewatering screen converts it to a stackable, conveyable product. Something that it can go onto a conveyor, and it stacks. And that's your money part. Now, the other part, so that's what we're trying to make here is frac sand. And that's 1/2 of this machine is making that material. Now the other half, remember I said there's this water that flows off of here with the -70 mesh material. They generally don't have a market for it, but it's a -70 mesh material. That material reports to another sump over here, and that sump pumps that slurry with the 70 mesh by down to nothing to clays. That pumps that to a 15-inch hydrocyclone, and that 15-inch hydrocyclone recovers the 70 mesh by 400 mesh material. And then that turns that into about a 60% solids, and then that material drops onto the other half of this screen. So 1/2 of the screen is discharging your money, your 8 mesh by 70 mesh, and the other half of the screen is discharging your 70 mesh by 400 mesh into another stackable, conveyable product. And the reason you want to do that is you want to get this stuff, that 70 mesh by 400 mesh, you don't want that reporting to a settling pond, because then you're going to be digging out your settling ponds constantly. It's much easier once you get it into a pipe to recover it while it's in a pipe, as opposed to putting it into a pond and recovering it later. And then the -400 mesh material, in this case, reports off to a settling pond. Now we do have technology and equipment available that can totally eliminate settling ponds, but that's not incorporated in this system. But it's something that we could look at down the road. A completely enclosed, no settling pond facility. So in a nutshell, what we're doing is taking material here, run-of-mine material, and we're creating 8 mesh by 70 mesh or 8 mesh by 50 mesh stockpile, and then in the other half we're making a 70 or a 50 mesh by 400 into a stockpile, and the 8 mesh by 70 is your money. That's your frac sand, and that's preparing that material to be sold for a dry processing plant, where it goes into a dryer and then gets screened into the different fractions which make up frac sand. And that's in a nutshell what this system does.